careful. Please be careful.
You gotta move back. You're gonna get hurt.
You good? Okay. Please down, please.
That's his attorney, Grant Smith, by his side in the bow tie, trying to quiet the crowd.
Mr. Stone is going to speak. He speaks for himself. You know that Roger Stone has always spoken for himself. He's never been shy about telling his story. He is innocent. We're going to defend this case, and we're going to win this case. But let me start out by saying that the spectacle this morning was completely unnecessary. Everyone knows where Roger Stone is. He's not in hiding. The spectacle this morning with a SWAT team breaking into his house, searching the house, scaring his wife, scaring his dogs, completely unnecessary. A telephone call would have done the job, and Mr. Stone would have appeared. But let Roger speak for himself. There's nothing to hide. He has nothing to hide, and he's spoken before, and he'll speak to you now. Roger?
Congratulations, Roger.
Thank you.
Stand with you, Roger.
Thank you. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. As I have always said, the only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about. After a 2-year inquisition, the charges today relate in no way to Russian collusion, WikiLeaks collaboration, or any other illegal act in connection with the 2016 campaign. I am falsely accused of making false statements during my testimony to the House Intelligence Committee. That is incorrect. Any error I made in my testimony would be both immaterial and without intent. I find it disturbing that the special counsel's office released a press release prior to informing my attorneys that I would be charged today. This morning, at the crack of dawn, 29 FBI agents arrived at my home with 17 vehicles with their lights flashing when they could simply have contacted my attorneys, and I would have been more than willing to surrender voluntarily. They terrorized my wife, my dogs. I was taken to the FBI facility, although I must say the FBI agents were extraordinarily courteous. I will plead not guilty to these charges. I will defeat them in court. I believe this is a politically motivated investigation. I am troubled by the political motivations of the prosecutors. And as I have said previously, there is no circumstance whatsoever under which I will bear false witness against the president, nor will I make up lies to ease the pressure on myself. I look forward to being fully and completely vindicated.
Roger, will you in any way cooperate with the special counsel's office? Will you in any way cooperate with the special counsel's office?
Since I was not contacted prior to the charges today, and my lawyers have not talked to the special prosecutors, I don't want to address that question, but I have made it clear I will not testify against the president.
The president has tweeted that you have guts.
Because I would have to bear false witness against him.
The president has tweeted that you have guts. What do you think the president meant by that you have guts?
I will be appearing for an arraignment in D.C. next week, and I'll address those questions at that time.
Roger, the president said that you had guts. He tweeted that. What do you think he meant by that?
Well, I intend to tell the truth. I have told the truth through this entire proceeding, and I will prove that in a court of law.
How strong are you going to ask the president for Trump?
I am one of his oldest friends. I am a fervent supporter of the president. I think he is doing a great job of making America great again.
If you're convicted, do you think
contact in the Trump campaign to contact WikiLeaks?
No, I've addressed that before. That is incorrect.
Roger, if you're convicted, do you think the president would pardon you? If you were convicted, do you think the president would pardon you?
Pardon me?
If you were convicted, do you think the president would pardon you?
The only person I have advocated a pardon for is Marcus Garvey.
Some from NBC News. So the question is, did you in any way work with the Russians to help President Trump?
Categorically not. No, absolutely not.
And the prosecutor, the special prosecutor,
We got you, Roger.
is gathering
We got you
evidence.
back, Roger.
Will you in any way?
With all due respect, I haven't even had a chance to read the indictment.
You haven't even read the indictment.
Correct. My attorneys have. I have not had that opportunity.
So will you help the prosecutor to answer his question?
I will address those questions next week in Washington, D.C.
Roger,
If you didn't do nothing wrong, what do you think to hear?
So there you have it. I don't know how much you could hear because, as I said, that scene outside the courthouse in Fort Lauderdale is raucous. But our Tom Yamos is right there, front and center. And, Tom, you were able to get several questions there to Roger Stone.
Shots down, dude. That's right, George. I don't know how much of that you could hear. It was very hard to listen. He focused mainly about the FBI coming to his house today. He claims they scared his wife and his dogs. But there were so many demonstrators here screaming over here, basically chanting, lock him up, lock him up, what was one of the mottos of the Trump campaign, you'll remember, for Hillary Clinton. They were chanting that to Roger Stone. They are still chanting right now. Others are chanting USA. He says he will fight all of these charges. He will plead not guilty. And, George, I asked him directly if he will cooperate with the special counsel's office. He claims they have never called him, and he has no plans on doing that at this moment, but he would comment further later on. I also asked him if he thought President Trump would pardon him if he were ever convicted. All he could say is that he wanted a pardon for Marcus Garvey. And I also asked him, I finally had to ask him, the president recently tweeted that Roger Stone had guts, what he thought he meant by that. And Roger Stone said it's because he's telling the truth. George?
Right, and what he also said in answer to your questions is that he would not bear false witness against the president. So he says that there's no way he's going to crumble, no way he says that this pressure that apparently the special counsel is putting on him is going to work. He is going to stand, he's going to fight, as we've just seen there right now. And Tom, his denials were very strong right there. But one of the things that Chris Christie was talking about earlier, this indictment includes documentary evidence.
That's right, and that's what I was trying to get at in the questions with him, but that's when he walked away from the microphones. According to that indictment, there are text messages, there are phone calls, there are emails with him allegedly speaking to Trump campaign officials and having knowledge of WikiLeaks. And that's one of the reasons why they went in there and they arrested him, and that's one of the reasons why he was in court today. He didn't want to answer specifics of the indictment. In fact, he claimed he hasn't even seen the indictment just yet.
Okay, Tom Yamos, thanks very much. I want to bring in Chris Christie again on the phone. Chris, quite a scene there, surreal scene down there in Fort Lauderdale. Vintage Roger Stone in many ways, who's been a sort of political propagandist for the last 30 or 40 years. You saw him say right there very, very strongly he's a supporter of President Trump. No way he would ever turn his back on the president.
Well, remember what he said, George. He said, I would never bear false witness against the president. I always try to listen to Roger Stone really carefully because I know he picks his words carefully. That means he's saying I would never do anything to lie to get myself off the hook. He didn't say he wouldn't tell the truth. I think that's one interesting point to make. Secondly, and I think the bigger thing is, in my experience in dealing with 130 people that when I was U.S. attorney, political folks that we indicted and convicted over the course of my career, I never heard a defendant come out on the steps and say, I'm guilty. They got me. They almost always come out, if they speak at all, and say exactly what Roger Stone said. So I don't see anything unusual about this. I don't see anything even noteworthy about it in the respect that when you look at the indictment and the specifics that Bob Mueller has in the indictments connected to the charges that he's brought, I think Roger Stone's in a lot of trouble.
And Chris, we heard what Roger Stone said there. He would never bear false witness. But we also know that Robert Mueller had a search warrant for the house in Florida, had a search warrant for Roger Stone's home in New York City as well. He's going to be collecting an awful lot of information. And going forward, potentially, Roger Stone is going to face a real choice on the question he didn't quite answer from Tom Yamas. Would he cooperate with the special counsel?
Exactly right. He's going to be facing some potentially some very significant time, George. Years and years in federal prison. And someone of Roger Stone's age is going to have some very, very difficult decisions to make, especially if the special counsel has additional information which can create more problems for Mr. Stone.
Final question. You know, we heard his answer to Tom Yamas there about the pardon. So the only one he's ever advocated is for Marcus Garvey. Talk about the political calculations for President Trump as he faces the prospect, perhaps, of pardoning Roger Stone.
I got to tell you, George, I can't imagine a political scenario under which he would pardon someone like Roger Stone. I don't think that is a wise act by the president, and I don't think that it would be a politically survivable act.
Okay, Chris Christie, thanks very much. I want to go to Terry Moran at the White House right now. We talked about the president's tweet earlier. The president has known Roger Stone a long time, worked with him a long time. Roger Stone has been in his corner for, I think, about 20 years, even though he left the campaign back in August, and the president remains in his corner right now.
No question about it. You see it there on the day that Roger Stone is indicted. The president again calls this the greatest witch hunt in the history of our country. No collusion, and questions CNN's motives there. They go way back, decades back. They are birds of a feather in a way. Brash New Yorkers who kind of strode onto the scene in the 1970s as young men. Roger Stone here in Washington working in Republican politics, Donald Trump in real estate, and they are symbiotic. They have a lot in common. Now, President Trump has tried to distance himself a little bit from Roger Stone. He said he didn't work on the campaign. FEC records showed that Roger Stone was on the payroll of that campaign. And at the end of the day, for all the talk about no collusion, the president is now facing the fact that 6 of his close associates have been indicted or convicted or pled guilty to lying about their contacts with Russia and WikiLeaks, Russia's cutout. If there's no collusion, why are they lying?
Okay, let me bring that to Pierre Thomas right now. Pierre, over at Justice, we've now seen this indictment from Roger Stone. You heard Roger Stone say that he never had any contact with the special counsel before this indictment. He'll be up in D.C. next week for the formal arraignment. And would you expect that the special counsel does have at least those initial conversations with Roger Stone and his attorneys about cooperation?
George, that's typical procedure. They will see if he wants to cooperate, although he's been antagonistic to the investigation throughout. And one of the things, George, that struck me about all this, you've interviewed Roger Stone, and watching him out there, he's a paid communicator. He was feeling the adoration of all those people out there, also the heat from the people who were against him. And one thing is very clear, that he now is facing up to 20 years in prison. And that's a different scenario than he's faced before. And now the full weight of this case will be brought to bear against him. We'll have to see how he responds. It's not a public relations fight anymore. It's a fight for his freedom.
Okay, let's bring in our chief legal analyst, Dan Abrams, for a final question right there. You heard the beginnings of Roger Stone's declarations right there. Do you think, when you look at that indictment, I know you spent a lot of time with it this morning, that these are charges he can beat?
Well, look, they're going to be tough, particularly on the witness tampering. I think we need to separate it out. He's only talking about the false statements, and you heard the language he used, right, which is, if I did make statements that were false, in essence, he was saying, they were immaterial or not intentional, because those are the critical factors in determining the necessary requirements for a false statements charge. But then there's another charge, which is the most dangerous, the most damning one in this indictment. And that's the witness tampering charge. The fact that they say he is basically trying to have another person testify falsely about what he told Stone, trying to encourage him to invoke his Fifth Amendment right, making references to the Godfather to get him to not tell the truth. That he's not addressing so far in this press conference. That's going to be the tough one, the toughest one, I think, for him to overcome. But in the end, I don't think you're going to see cooperation by Roger Stone with the special counsel.
We will hear from him next week when he appears in court in Washington, D.C. Thank you all very much. Our coverage is going to continue on our live channel. You can get that through abcnews.com. And, of course, a full report tonight on World News Tonight with David Muir. Have a good afternoon.